All right, so I've got this piece. It's got layers of paint on it, and here you can see they mustn't have used any primer. It's coming off really easy. To get this off, I'm just running one of these paint scrapers all over it and getting as much off as I can before I go in and sand. Alright, we are nearly there. I've just got to do the top. So you can see here the layers of paint. We've got pink, white, grey, and then the actual wood itself. So I've got a little bit of emission in front of me, but it is coming off pretty easy. So apart from a little bit of elbow grit, you're doing good. Okay, so next up I'm going to bleach my piece. I just want to see how it kind of comes up because there is a bit of a red tone to this. Look, it might not turn out any good, but I'm going to give it a crack and see how we go. To bleach your piece, all you need is a mix of regular bleach. I'm just using some Household White King, and I've just mixed that 50-50 with some water to apply it. I'm just using a normal paintbrush. I've chosen a nice wide one so that I can slap it on real quick. You might need 2 or 3 applications before you get to a colour that you like on your piece, so don't be alarmed if it doesn't happen straight away. So I'm going to start with one, let that fully dry, see how it looks, and then we'll go from there. Once you are happy with the look of your wood, you'll need to neutralise it before you go ahead with any kind of paint. That just makes sure that you're not going to have any kind of reaction between the bleach and the paint going ahead. For that you can just use plain old water, but a lot of people recommend water and vinegar, which is what I use, and so far I haven't had any issues. Right, so this is my second coat of bleach. It's completely saturated and you can see how it looks whilst it is just sitting there drying. So I'll show you in just a moment, once it's dry, what it looks like. Also, while I'm waiting for the bleach to dry, as you can see, this is the back of the piece and there is no backing on it. I pulled that off already. It was in pretty rough shape as well. Lots of splits, was hardly even connected. So look, all good. I got a new piece of plywood just to pop on the back there, and I haven't sanded here, as you can see, because that's all going to be covered up, so no point wasting time doing that. The top there is still drying. You can see some patches have come through there, so you can start to see that it is lightening up. But look, you've got to let it fully dry before you can see where you're at and go from there. Okay, so this is fully dry, and this is after 2 coats of the bleach. So you can see it's still a little bit red on the sides, but the top is actually really nice and pale. So I think I'm going to go over it a couple more times and focus on the side areas here and just see how it comes up. Alright, so now I've got to get the paint off the drawers. It is pretty thick and it looks like it's had quite a few layers of paint on it before. So to save myself some time sanding, I'm going to use a paint scraper to get as much as I can off, just like I did with the rest of the piece. But I have invested in a heat gun. Now this is just the cheap brand Ortizo, which I just got from Bunnings. It was 40 bucks. Because I've seen a few videos where people have just heated up the paint and it's scraped off a lot easier. So I'm going to go ahead and give that a try on the drawers and see how easy it actually is. Alright, so now I'm going to work on the drawers. I'm just going to give them a light sand all over. I'm not going to sand these back to natural, so it doesn't have to be a hardcore sand, just enough to rough it up, make the surface nice and smooth and ready for paint. So I've just sanded down the front of the first drawer, and as you can see there's lots of holes in it which I'm going to need to fill, and lots of crap on the front. So look, unfortunately, as much as I'd love to keep these natural, they are going to get painted. I'm going to fill these holes in, let it dry, sand it back, and it will be good as new. Alright, so all the drawers are sanded, so I've got all the gunk off the front and given the insides a light sand as well. Right, so next up I am going to fill all the holes, and for that I am just using the Timbermate filler that I've got here. This one's just in the pine. Look, it comes in all different colours, so if you are filling an area which may be visible, you want to pick a colour that's similar to your wood so it doesn't stand out. For these, I'm going to paint over them, so it doesn't really matter what colour I choose, and all I've got is the pine, so that is why I'm using it. Alright, so all 3 drawers are filled and I am just waiting for them to dry. Once they dry, we'll sand them off and they'll be nice and smooth. Alright, while I've got the back off it, I'm just going to paint the inside. I'm just going to paint it with some white chalk paint. I've got the aged white and the Canterbury blue, so I'm just going to paint that on the inside just to make it look nice and fresh. You're never really going to see the inside, but I feel like it just makes the piece more complete, and this is going to a friend, so I want it to look perfect. So it's getting a bit dark now, but the inside is all painted. Now I'm just going to do the 2 coats inside. Doesn't need to be perfect. As I said, you're not going to really see it, but it's just to add to the overall look. Next up, I am going to go over the whole piece now that the bleach is kind of all dry. You need to neutralize it. So to do that, I'm just going to use a mix of water and vinegar, and I'm going to wipe all over the piece. Wait till it's fully dry, and then I might go over it again with just some plain water and let that dry. Alright, so it's the next day. It is all dry and ready to sand. So I'm just going to use my mouse sander for this one. And I've got a 120 grit sandpaper on top. I'm just going to give it a nice light sand all over. And then I'm going to come over to the piece here, which is all dry. After we've bleached it, I've neutralized it, and I'm just going to run the sander over it as well. As you can see, it kind of raises up the grain a little bit when you do the bleaching process, so you've just got to go over the whole thing and smooth it out before you go on to anything else. Alright, so it's all sanded. Now this one turned out pretty good, and the other ones just have a little divot and a couple of little divots that have come out, so I'm just going to fill those ones, let it dry. I want it to be really smooth because I am painting this all white, so you will notice any imperfections, which I don't want. And I'm going to be putting the drawer handles down the center, so again this area will be visible, so it needs to be as smooth as we can get it. With the bleach all dry, I've decided to go over the whole thing with some whitewashing. So I've just got a mix of a little bit of white paint and some water. Look, there's no real magic number. I kind of just play with it till I get a consistency that I like. So I'm just going over the whole piece, letting it sit, and then I'm going to wipe over it here, as you can see, with a bit of a rag, and we'll see how it comes up. Right, so the drawers are all dry now, and I've just gone over those few extra spots with some sandpaper to get them nice and smooth, and they've come up perfectly. Now to sand it smooth, I just used some really fine sandpaper. It was 240 grit with just a sanding block, just to smooth out those little extra bits. So this is all going to be covered with paint. You won't see any of the filler, and it will be nice and smooth. Alright, so the frame is all done. I am just going to go over the top of this piece with some of the top coat. So for that, I'm just using the Cabot's Clear water base in the satin, and do a couple of coats of that and let it dry. And the rest of the piece, as I said, I'm just going to go over some furniture wax. Alright, so I've top coated the top and it's just drying. You can see the colour that's come up with that top coat. It looks beautiful. And for the rest of the piece, I'm just going to do some furniture polish, and for that I'm using this traditional Pete's polish. It's a beeswax polish, and I just got it from my local store downtown, so I'm not sure how readily available it is elsewhere, but it is good stuff and it smells divine. Alright, so it's fully waxed now. You can see the beautiful changing colour. So the top is just drying. I've got the top coat on there, and I've waxed the whole rest of the piece, and it's come up really nice. So I'm just going to wait for all that to dry. I'll rebuff in the furniture wax, and I'll do another couple of coats of the top coat. Now time to move on to the drawers and get them painted. Okay, so now it's time to paint the drawers. So I've got them all laid out, and I've got them sort of just raised up some cardboard boxes just so I can get right to the edges and underneath. I'm going to be painting it in the fresh white from the Canterbury blue. I find this spreads really well. I'm going to need a couple of coats of this. I've cleaned and prepped all the drawers after I sanded them, so it's really important to prep your surface. So just make sure it's nice and clean again before you pop your paint on. To apply it, I've just put it in just a little tray. I've actually used these plastic containers. They're like meal portion containers, but they work great for paint. So I'm just using that and a wide paintbrush to apply. Alright, so drawers are all dry, and now I'm just going to go ahead and put the final coat on them, and that will make them look nice and smooth, nice and finished, and the drawers will be done. Alright, so I'm going to put the final coat on the drawers. So I'm just using a roller with a microfiber roller and some of the fresh white paint as we were before. For the final coat, I'm using a roller because I find that it applies much smoother and it's a lot quicker and easier. Alright, so I'm just going to stencil the side of the drawers. I'm just using this palm stencil, some metallic wax in the white gold, and just a little paintbrush which I've cut the ends of just to dab it in place. So basically I'm just going to press this on the side and move it along, and you just want to be really light with the wax. And if you are quite light, you can reuse the stencil. Otherwise, if you find that you've overloaded it too much, you will have to wipe it in between just to make sure that you don't smudge your pattern as you go across. Alright, so I'm about to cut the backing for the drawers. I've just got it marked out. It's really easy. I just held it against the back of the drawers. And I finally got a power tool, so I've got a jigsaw which I'm going to use to cut the excess off. Alright, so it's all cut to size now. I'm just using some small tack nails to hold it all in place. Alright, so now I'm going to pop in some inlays for the drawers. For that, I'm just using some wallpaper. I've chosen this gold pattern because it will match the sides, which I've stenciled in gold. To adhere them to the bottoms, I'm just using some PVA glue, so I'm going to pop some underneath and on top. Now I've already cut and measured each piece to size, so all that's left now is to glue them in. So I've decided to add some white wax to this piece. For that, I'm using the Dixie white wax. Now, I've never used it before, but I've seen other people use it, and it does give your piece quite a cool look. So the idea is that it's just going to catch into any of the grooves that are left in the wood, and it'll just show that little bit of extra white coming through. So I think it'll look really good, especially on the sides where it's got that red tone still just slightly showing through. So just using a cloth to rub it all in and then going back over it and buffing it in a bit more. So here's the final product. You can see it's nice and smooth. It's got that nice coastal fresh feel that I want. Excuse the lighting, it's a little bit hard to see, but trust me, it does look awesome. Alright, so I'm going to clear coat the drawers. For that, I'm using the Cabot's Clear in the water base. To apply it, I'm just using one of these sponge brushes, and I'm just going basically around the whole exterior of the drawers. put another coat of white on the top, so that's just drying, but I'm going to get everything else done while the white is drying, and then we'll go over the tops of the drawers tomorrow when it's all dry. Alright, so these are the handles that I'm going to put on my drawers. They're just timber. They were already clear coated, but I've just sanded them off, and I'm going to go over with them some of the Dixie Belle Best Dang wax in the white, just so that will match the rest of my piece. One of the drawer handles come with a little bit of discoloration. You can see it there. I've tried to sand it out, but it has not worked. So I'm just going to sort of see if the wax covers it a little bit, and if not, then I have ordered some other handles as a backup, but we'll see how this goes and go from there. So now we are up to our last step, and that is popping on the handles. As you saw before, I've sanded these back, popped on some white wax, and that's just so that it matches the rest of the piece. So next up, we've got to measure up the fronts, make sure they are perfectly aligned, pop them on, and we are done. When you're measuring up your handles, really take the time to make sure they are perfect and they are in line, because you will notice them even if they're slightly off. So really put the effort in the first time around, because it can be frustrating if you don't. So I'm going to go ahead and take you with me while I do that, and we're done. Alright, so I'm just measuring up my drawers. I'm using a tape measure, a pencil, and a level to make sure that I get the placement for the handles perfect. So if you keep watching along, you'll see how that turns out. I'm also using a little bit of glue tack. So as I've measured them out, I'm using the glue tack to temporarily adhere the handles to the drawers, just so that I can see if it is lined up and if I've got my placement correct. Alright, so when I drill the holes for the handles, I don't want it to split on the other side. So I've got a plank of wood on the inside of the drawers, and I'm just using the clamps to hold it in place. And I've also got some cloth just to put underneath the clamp so it doesn't make any kind of marks on the front of the drawers. I found this worked really well. So give it a crack next time you are drilling in your handles, so that you avoid any kind of splitting on your wood in the back. Okay, so almost perfect, but my second handle just wasn't quite level, and it was really obvious next to the other two. So I'm just taking it out and remeasuring it so that we can get it perfectly level. Luckily, the new hole will actually be covered by the handle, so you won't even see it, but I will fill it in just so it is perfect, because you'll notice it on the inside. So I'm just remeasuring it, re-drilling it, and gonna screw it in, and you'll see at the end it comes up perfect.